Hi, Bill Henshaw here again, your friendly local constitutional kook with more current events updates. And this one, as most of you are probably well aware, involves a spate of even more shootings and killings by law enforcement officers while quote unquote on duty. And the question I think all of us have is, when is this going to stop? Okay, now you have a 13-year-old kid in Chicago named Adam Toledo who just got shot and killed. And apparently, as he turned around without a weapon in his hand, with his hands up, the cop shoots him. What the hell is this? I mean, even conceding in this era, 13-year-old kids maybe aren't the naive babes in the woods they were back in my era. And even conceding that, what the hell is going on here when you get this happening? And now you have the cop that committed murder in Wisconsin, I believe. Or not murder, this is where he shot Jacob Blake, who's in the hospital paralyzed for life. And he apparently is going to walk without any charges being filed at all. And you look at this and you say, what the hell is going on here? And we have another one also that has just happened. In fact, Pat Robertson commented on this one with Kim Potter, who managed to confuse her gun with a taser and shot and killed somebody. Now, this one, by the way, I understand apparently this police officer and the police chief involved have resigned from office and now they're pressing charges against her. What probably, in my view, should be at least second-degree murder. And I would normally be disposed to say first-degree murder. And I might if I was on a criminal grand jury, too. Because you just can't confuse your gun with a taser. And if that sounds familiar, it is. Anybody remember the episode out here at the local BART station in Fruitvale with Johannes Mesley confusing his gun with the taser and killing Oscar Grant? And all this bastard got, I think, was something like a 3-year sentence, and he got released early for good behavior. Where it seems to me, if I'm on a jury, we come back second-degree murder, 25 years to life, and maybe more than that. I mean, it just has to stop. And by the way, I think the Grant case, they did actually file a civil rights BS claim, which isn't what you want to do. But this was so bad here, I think they're going to get a good settlement if they haven't already got one. Because once in a while, the system has to make it look good. That's the only way you ever get anything out of civil rights, which don't exist right along with the 14th Amendment. Ain't out of there. No, what you do is you address the issues that my unopposed issues, I got multiple ones that cover all 6 articles of the Constitution. You can learn more about that. Send me an email, youwinnincourt@gmail.com. I'll get you the information out. You're going to love it. How good it is once you know what your rights are. You know, they didn't teach me 50 odd years ago in school, and they sure as hell didn't teach you either. But I put in 5 decades of intense, passionate, and independent study of the Constitution, history, and laws of the United States. And I have that information available. And I'm now 15 years all in, by the way. I can't even apply for any job because I don't have a right to engage in quote unquote employment, i.e., behind the scenes. That's a paraphrase for being a slave in the de facto National Socialist government. Because when I found out about that BS with the social insecurity number, I rescinded the sucker over 25 years ago and did it by certified mail and explained exactly what I was doing. I get a letter back, by the way, and those of you that get my materials, I'll send you a copy from then Social Insecurity Chairman Dorcas Hardy conceding I was right, that it's voluntary to get a social insecurity number, 42 USC 302A8. Law's been on the books for 70, 80 odd years. And wouldn't you know how convenient it is with a just a system? There are no known case law decisions on the statute, most particularly in the Supreme Court of the United States, where if it was doing the job it was supposed to be doing and taking cases like this. And this is a double whammy here because, and they almost ruled it in 1959, I believe, cases called Fleming v. Nestor. 363 U.S. 603, 5-4. And they almost ruled Social Security to be the bill of attainder, which is exactly what it is: the taking of life, liberty, or property without judicial process. We'll learn more about that later. I'd love to talk more about it now. But that said, that's what should be going on here. And with my issues that you can use, and what I call the crown jewel of my unopposed issues, no states remaining which were admitted into this union up to and including Minnesota, February 14th, 1859. After that, ain't been in a perpetual state of abeyance for about 160 odd years. So there are no states. If that's the case, then in effect we have no government, because in the territories, almost all the government officials have to be appointed by the president. Article 2, Section 2 appointments clause, and they haven't been, and or appointed by a territorial governor, and the president hasn't made any of those appointments either. Now, yes, that's going to jump right out at you. So you can't do this. Those are anarchist arguments. They sure as hell are, but we are not the anarchists. They are, courtesy of their bosses at 120 Broadway, New York, the New York banksters. Now, if that's the case, what used to be peace officers in my day and age when I grew up, that we rarely, if ever, had anything like this happen that you see such a spate in the last 4 or 5 years in particular. Peace officers, not law enforcement thugs. And we just didn't have anything like this happen. But nowadays, if they think they're acting within the scope of their authority and pursuant to some or another allegedly applicable statutory scheme to prosecute you and me for victimless crimes, boy, have they got another thing coming. And to you law enforcement types that may be listening to this out there, you get on board with your sheriff, your attorney general, the governor, and tell them to start, exercising their sworn duty to see the laws are faithfully executed. Because if they were to do that and tell the truth, which would be nice coming from a government official for once, that a person, quote unquote, in just about any statutory scheme you can name, for example, no person shall drive upon the highway unless he holds a valid license issued by this code, ain't. Person there means the same thing it does in Section 1 of the non-existent 14th War Amendment, and that's an artificial corporate entity. Now, I don't know about you out there, but you can take a look at me and see how it would be impossible to confuse me with, say, I've been mugged, or IBM, or Chase Bank. I'm not one of those. And in an earlier era, I got an affidavit from my mom. We laughed about it when I did it. And she said that the government had nothing to do with my creation. It was merely between her and my dad. And as silly as that seems on the surface, an affidavit like that is a killer, because they think they created all of us, and what they create, they own. And that's why the government doesn't think that you have any rights that the de facto National Socialist government is bound to respect. And that's why the 90 part of the U.S. Supreme Court can rule in Enoch v. Williams, 370 U.S. 1, that a quote-unquote taxpayer has a zero interest in his property. You can tax him out of existence without an administrative hearing. No right to your property in the form of your time and labor. You're out of there. Now, if you're a corporation, fine. The government created you. They own you. They can do that. They can't do it to you, and they can't do it to me. And oh, by the way, they have the burden of proof when you get into their BS corrupt courts to prove that we're corporate entities that they created. If they can't prove we're a person, they can't prove the statute applies to us. End of case. It doesn't matter what happened or did not happen. An extreme here, and most of my quotes, as you'll find by getting my materials, and send me an email, youwinnincourt@gmail.com, for my modestly priced constitutional defense document packets. Most of the quotes I have in there come from those 9 old parts in Washington, D.C. One that doesn't, and I mentioned this on some other videos, this is a very important one, because they had a case come up in Montana around the turn of the century, back in 1900, back when the Constitution was still taken seriously, despite the fact that it hadn't formally been in existence for then 30 years or so. And you had a guy that got convicted of murder in Montana and sentenced to death. And his attorney, and I guess in that area they actually did their jobs on occasion, which would be nice to see now, went to the Montana Supreme Court and said, not so fast. This murder occurred on a federal military reservation, and therefore the Montana court did not have jurisdiction. The Montana Supreme Court reversed the conviction and set it aside on jurisdictional grounds. Not long after, the U.S. attorney came and filed charges in the local federal district court. The same attorney shows up and says, not so fast. Yeah, when Montana joined the Union, and that was relatively recent in that time frame, it did concede civil jurisdiction to the federal government, but not criminal jurisdiction. The judge, in realizing the situation, and this is exactly what he said, that it's quote unquote unfortunate that a murderer should go unwhipped of justice, but more unfortunate that a court without jurisdiction should exercise it. And he knew the case was over because now in Montana, the alleged murderer would have had double jeopardy going around if they tried him a second time. So he couldn't be tried. If he did it, he got away with it. But it's much more important to maintain the vitality of the Constitution than it is to let the proverbial camel stick his nose in the tent, because once that happens, the ball game is over. And that's what I hope the 9 parts recognize with the core packing plan that I just referred to in the last video. If they can do that, and especially if idiot Biden can do it acting as commander-in-chief of the armed forces and just do it by executive order, that's a dead giveaway. Not only are there no states, there are no judicial courts remaining anywhere in the United States. And without judicial courts, no judicial process, no trial by jury according to the course of the common law, which the jury there can rule on the facts and the law. And no judicial process means every damn law in the books, every one of them, is a bill of attainder, otherwise known back in the days of the Magna Carta as a writ of precipice. And those of you that read Blackstone's commentaries, you're going to see all of that in there. Every damn law they have on the books is unenforceable, right or wrong, or good or bad. That's the way it is, and that's what we have to start doing. Is all of us working together, Asians, Americans, Africans, and get them to quit this divide and conquer crap they've been doing for at least 150 years, and present issues like this in front of juries that are going to understand it and bring back not guilty verdicts and make all these laws unenforceable. That's what makes the bastards change their tune, and it'll do it quick. Because I don't care what you can act in Sacramento and or Washington, D.C. If you can't enforce it, see you later. You're out of there. We'll get the government back in we should have to start with. It won't be perfect, but we can go from there and make changes consistent with the Constitution and not in contravention of it. So I've gotten off track a little bit here. I know I have, but that's a long message to your law enforcement types out there to get yourself trained so that you know that the things you're doing out here, stopping somebody for an expired registration on a car and shooting him to death, that can't possibly be right under any possible circumstances and training that you may have had. It just doesn't work. It should be obvious. It would be to a room full of fourth graders. And you don't understand it? Law school graduates don't get it? What the hell is this? It's got to stop. And civil rights is not the answer. I mean, you're going to see there are going to be some successful cases here, quote unquote successful, but they won't be nearly as successful as they would be if we fought a common law trespass via armis by force of arms against the perps, and not only got money damage, but also had him charged with treason to the Constitution, which is what they're doing when they're acting without authority in violation of the Constitution. That's treason. That's the U.S. Supreme Court saying this, not me. Cases Cohen's v. Virginia, 6 week 264. Chief Justice John Marshall, the guy was an infallible icon of Harvard and Yale who was never wrong, was he? This is them saying it, not me. These are the kind of changes we need to get back to our government of defined and limited powers, and the Republican form of government that's overtly guaranteed to the states by Article 4, Section 4 of the Constitution. But we get that back, it'll be so good you almost can't stand it. But we have a fight ahead of us. I knew when I started out in 1983, Valentine's Day Massacre. I got thrown in jail. Valentine's Day was a weekend, and I was so stupid back then and ignorant. I said, "What am I doing here? I thought jail was for bad people." Yeah, right. Yeah, I figured it out, and it didn't take too long to do it. But over the course of the 5 decades, I've learned a great deal, and I've been called a walking constitution. And maybe that's true, but they certainly can't handle me in their own courts. And that's what you get, by the way, when you get my materials, because we're going to be doing things with redress of grievance. And we're going to have a lot of leverage because of the record that we're going to have set in your case or would have been set there. And the record we're going to have that backs up that record. I've got 5 decades worth of relevant, admissible, documentary evidence on every point that we're going to be using here. That's going to make them get the wallet out because they cannot afford to have me take the stand as an expert witness and explain to the jury a cappella 230 years of history of the United States. I mean, sometimes I laugh about that a little bit and I said, yeah, they can ask me the first question on Monday morning and we'll get to question 2 Wednesday afternoon, maybe. But that's how screwed up this system is, and that's why you get my materials. You have right now almost 600 jury instructions that come along with it. And if I'm making the opening speech, I apologize to the jury and I say, I realize that's a lot of instructions, but they didn't teach you a damn thing in school either. And you need to know our theory of the case because once you do that, you're going to see that corresponds with what you instinctively understand the Constitution means. That's why I've never seen a jury. I'm never going to see one. And you probably won't either if you use my materials. Now send me an email, youwinnincourt@gmail.com. I'll get you the information out there and we can talk about a lot of things here. It's all so good if you just know it. And I haven't been teaching this. God, I don't know if my mom got a whole lot of it back in the 20s and 30s when she was in school. You may have to go back to the 19th century. And I had some of my grandma's law books that she, not law books, but school books she had from that time. And you read these books, McGuffey's Six Readers, Swinton's, Appleton's. My goodness, they look to me a lot like book you would get in college these days. Although not so much anymore, since UC Berkeley, Starboard, Yale, and all those big law schools like that aren't teaching the Constitution anymore. But the books they had back in the day, people did know, and you had much more reliable juries, and you could have confidence getting in front of a jury that they're going to do the right thing once you laid out the case for them. That's no longer true. There's no longer, in effect, the right to trial by jury. And indeed, the non-old parts have said there's no right to a trial by jury in any criminal misdemeanor case. That's true. Blanton v. Nevada, 489 U.S. 538. And they've implied that there's no right to trial by jury in any case. They haven't said that one yet. They have said there's no right to an appeal in any criminal case. McCain v. Durston, 153 U.S. 684. And you get the habeas corpus, and all they recognize is statutory habeas corpus. And the court has said actual innocence is not grounds for the issuance of that writ. They don't give a fuck whether you're innocent or not. See you later. And then we had a case out of my home state of Virginia that got there called Coleman v. Thompson, 501 U.S. 722. The guy sitting there on death row. His attorney files the statutory writ 2 days too late, quote unquote. And yet this in the court that has said in the Constitution mandates you can challenge jurisdiction at any time, which alas isn't what they did, but if they had done that, and the court said we can't hear it because it's 2 days too late, guy got 2,000 volts. See you later, have a nice day. That's how screwed up this system is, and it's what we have to fix. Happily, we're the only nation ever created in the history of the world that it can be done. And it's my mission to get out there and do it myself, teach you how to do it. And oh, by the way, you can teach your kids all this because they're not going to learn it in school either. And your posterity, and set a sterling example of going out there and challenging authority and showing them it can be done. That's the beauty of all this. And that's why at the age of 72, my life is still ahead of me. I've got a lot of work to do, and I've got a good 8 or 10 years with family genes and history, maybe longer than that with a little luck. And I'm going to do what I can to get the job done and teach all of you out there what to do and how to do it. Now that said, send me an email, youwinnincourt@gmail.com, and I'll get you the information out. Meanwhile, subscribe, like the videos, tell your friends, get the word out. If we all work together, Americans, Africans, and Asians, and present real issues in front of real juries, that's how we get the bastards off our backs. Thank you.